Arkansas, Oklahoma Synod, and I want to thank you for the ways that you're part of that. I want to make sure also to give greetings to you from Bishop Mike Gerlinghouse. You were so thoughtful and caring when he was in the hospital with blood clots, and you prayed for him and sent that quilt, and it was incredibly meaningful to him, and he wanted to make sure I said thanks and greetings and said a hello to you, because it really matters, that kind of care that you do, and it's something that I think you at Resurrection do so very well. So greetings on behalf of Bishop Mike. I want to thank you because, well, it's not easy being Lutheran in the buckle of the Bible Belt.
Amen. Preach it.
The buckle of the Bible.
And I want to thank you for the ways that you do that. Now, we're not the only Christians, by no means, but there is a Lutheran accent, and it's not "ya sure ya betcha." The accent that we have is one of grace. Grace that says, come as you are, really, as you are. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all together. You don't have to feel faith so close to God, although you could sometimes, but sometimes you might not. You don't have to have it all together, all figured out. In fact, we begin almost every worship service with a confession that we need God's help. Sometimes it's that formal, we confess that we're in bondage to sin. I love the words that you used this morning to say, we do not have our lives together. Sometimes it's completely unmanageable. Sometimes we're our best selves, but often we're something in between. We all come together and say, you don't have to be perfect here, and if you want to pretend to be perfect, that's okay. The rest of us will tolerate you. But here we are coming and doing the only thing we can do, which is cling to the cross of Jesus. Cling to Jesus, who we know looks with love and grace, kindness and forgiveness, and gives us a fresh start again and again and again. So thank you. Thank you for the ways that you try to embody this kind of grace, radical grace, that puts emphasis on God's work first, God's goodness, and then trying to live our lives out of that. Thank you for the ways that you embody that here in this place and this part of Oklahoma. I believe that we have this light here in Yukon. We have the little light in Derazet, Texas, and Jonesboro, Arkansas, and Tulsa, and Oklahoma City, and all over. And because of this witness, because of your light, I think together as Synod, we shine more brightly because we're in this together. And because of the ways we support and encourage one another, I think we're that much bolder because we are in this together as a Synod. So I want to thank you for your partnership and that you let me be your assistant to the bishop in our Synod and to be part of this work. So greetings and thanks on behalf of our Synod. Now we get to the sermon part. We find ourselves in kind of a strange place this morning. It feels like Christmas is all around. The lights are coming up. We're getting ready for Thanksgiving, the holidays. And yet somehow it feels like Christ the King Sunday screeches us to a halt. Don't you feel we should be talking about baby Jesus being in the manger, adorable, screaming, but give it to the mom. Adorable baby Jesus. And yet here, before we get to that part, that Advent season, we find ourselves at the foot of the cross, Jesus crucified. I don't know about you, but today, when I think about our world around us, sometimes it feels a little bit more Good Friday than Christmas morning. Sometimes it feels like that psalm that says the nations rage and roar and the mountains are in its tumult. I look around and it just feels like there's something lacking that we Do you know what I'm talking about? I mean, it was so sad. I was going to listen. I travel a lot, and so I was going to listen to a book book on tape. It's not on tape. It's not on CD. It's through the internet. But I was listening to a book on Mr. Rogers, and I was kind of afraid to listen to the biography because it seems like all of the decent human beings that I looked up to as a child, well, we find out that they're part of something scandalous or horrific. Good news, it looks like Mr. Rogers was actually a decent guy. Isn't that wonderful? There's no scandal. And I thought, I shouldn't be that relieved, should I? But it does show that integrity is something hard to come by. Integrity being the one who says and embodies the values and core of their being, and they match up. I think we see that, a glimpse of that maybe at Mr. Rogers. But I see that most clearly in all time and all places. We see that integrity, that truth that sets us free when we look at the foot of the cross, when we see Jesus. Jesus with his hands crucified, Jesus bloodied and sweating and in agony, Jesus pushed to the very limits of human endurance. And in that moment, does Jesus respond with curses, raining down fire from heaven, which he could have done? He's also God. Instead, Jesus looks with compassion and kindness. When we read our story today, it talks about the they. They went and crucified Jesus. And I kind of wondered, who are the they? Who are the they that they're talking about? Is it the soldiers? The soldiers who came in and just doing their job, right? They're following orders. That's what soldiers do. Soldiers who we train to protect us, who have to do horrible things, following orders. Are they the they that they're talking about? The ones who put the nails in Jesus. And yet when Jesus sees the soldiers, Jesus looks with love and compassion. Doesn't say it's okay, but instead we hear the words, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I wonder how often you and I are a little bit like the they, those soldiers, just following orders. Maybe not something as big, or maybe, for those of you who have had to serve, maybe not quite the same, but how often do we just kind of go through life? It's legal, it's acceptable, it's what you do, and we do things and we say things and we participate in ways that really hurt other people, and we just blindly keep on doing it. It's not okay. Yet Jesus looks with compassion on you and I, trying to live our lives and figure it out, trying to be people of integrity. And Jesus looks and says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So maybe the they are the soldiers, but the they could also be the leaders. Now I get a little afraid when they talk about the religious leaders because, well, right? It's a little frightening, and I think, I try to think compassionately, oh my goodness, they were just trying to keep the temple doors open. They were trying to make deals with the Roman government to make it so that they could keep on going. They could keep the temple going and keep their religion intact somehow and their way of life intact somehow. But yet here they found themselves trading this for that and making compromise here for the sake of this over here, that I think quite quickly, and yet over time, they lost their heart. They lost what they were about. So intent on trying to figure things out, it sort of sounds like politics. But I won't say which way or where, but it's easy to lose our way, isn't it? It's easy to try to do something so right that we forget in the compromises and the decisions and the work, that we get caught up in that we lose sight of what we're actually about, what God is actually calling us to. And Jesus looks at them and looks at us and says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then there's that third group of they, the people. The people, they just stood there and watched as Jesus was being tortured and mocked and humiliated, Jesus crucified and dying. They stood there and watched. I wonder if they were there. Maybe they even tasted the bread and the fish from the feeding of the 5,000. These people who saw Jesus was the real deal. Jesus who talked about healing and compassion. And when he saw the leper, so grotesque in the disease on the skin that no one would even touch them, no human touch, and Jesus, before they are healed, reaches out with human touch, divine touch, that they might be known and seen and a part. And then Jesus heals them. Jesus, the real deal. They saw the miracles. They saw the compassion. They saw the kindness. They saw and heard the powerful preaching calling us to God. And yet, when he was crucified, they stood by and watched. How often have you been there? Pastor Mark talks about divine appointments. You know, those times when maybe there's a little bit of nudge that maybe God's asking me to say something or do something or stand up or maybe walk away. That divine appointment, have we been there? Someone being bullied or made fun of, or words saying that tear down. We just stood there and watched. Not saying a word, not doing a thing. Jesus looks with compassion on that cross. No one standing by him, no one speaking up. And yet Jesus looks not with curse, but with compassion. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. In Jesus, we see integrity. In Jesus, we see hope. We see truth. We see the God who is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The one we can count on. Even though the nations rise and fall and the mountains shake in their tumult, we know that God's steadfast love endures forever. God doesn't make sin okay, and yet God looks with compassion and forgiveness, giving us a new start, a new day, again and again. Filled with so much compassion from Jesus, shown such love and patience and kindness. Let's be imitators of Jesus. Let's model our life around this one. Jesus, the one who even in the midst of endurance, even when the turkey is in the oven and crying out for work, and you have children and you have in-laws and you have people, and taking that deep breath, nailing on that smile. Maybe we can be imitators of Christ. I don't mean to belittle what Jesus does, but it is everyday acts of peace, and compassion and forgiveness and love that make you and I imitators of Jesus Christ. So being shown such love and compassion, let's be forces of kindness and goodness and courage in our world in such